I wrote a series of books on this verse. In Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 17, Paul says, "This I say, therefore." Now, the word therefore connects everything that he said before that. He had just told the Ephesian church that before the foundation of the world, they were chosen in God. Do you believe that? Pretty hard to believe in the natural mind. But he told the Ephesian church, you were chosen in God before the foundation of the world. You were predestinated. You were called. And he told the Romans in Romans 8 and verse 29 that those who he foreknew, he predestinated to be conformed to the image of his Son. So Paul spent about the first 3 chapters of Ephesians telling them what all they had gained by Calvary. That because of Calvary and the magnitude of Calvary, that now they could see and understand with a new mind, with the mind of Christ, that they had been chosen even before they were born. They were predestinated even before they were born. Because they have the seed of Christ within you. Within you is the seed of Christ. That is the Spirit that has been regenerated. The Scriptures call that the seed of Christ. And the seed of Christ in you has been predestinated and pre-programmed to reproduce the life of God in this holy temple. Can you believe that? Not without a revelation. I tell people all the time, please spend time in the presence of God. Spend enough time in the presence of God to see if these things be true. And oh, Father, I used to pray when I first began to see this, I would pray like the Apostle Paul prayed, Father, open the eyes of my understanding, that I may see that that same Spirit that was in Christ is now within me. So Paul told them that they had been predestinated, they had been called, they had been forgiven. And then in chapter 4 and verse 17 he said, this I say therefore, and I testify in the Lord, that you henceforth don't walk as the Gentiles. Since you have been called, you have been predestinated, you have been chosen before the foundation of the world. Don't be like the Gentiles. Don't be like those unbelievers who don't know that they have the life of God within them. For 2,000 years, most of us as Christians have lived like we don't really have the reality of what the Scriptures say we have. So Paul says, don't be like the Gentiles. Walk not as other Gentiles in the vanity of their mind, having their understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them. You see, as Christians for 2,000 years, we have pretty much walked in ignorance. We read these verses, yet they're not real to us. Why? Because most of us have lived in the vanity of the carnal mind, not having the revelation that we have the mind of Christ. I read to you earlier where Paul said God was in Christ, reconciling the world unto himself, not holding them accountable for their sin. Do you know why that is? Because if you're a Christian and you're not living out of the mind of Christ, you are out of your mind. You are literally insane. And even in this physical realm, when a person is insane, they are not held accountable for what they do. They're simply put in an institution where hopefully they can be helped. And so God realizes when he looks at his people and he sees them in disobedience, he sees them with habits and hang-ups in their life. Believe me, God, I know that he's not angry. But he knows you are just not operating out of the mind of Christ. And so if you will let him, if you will receive his forgiveness, if you will receive his righteousness. You see, his righteousness you can't earn. His love you can't earn. He proved beyond the shadow of a doubt his immeasurable love by becoming a man and dying on a cross to show you how could he be angry with you if he was willing to die for you. He died for you so that Jesus could become the life-giving Spirit and regenerate you, so that your spirit would come alive in the power, in the ability, in the authority of his presence within you. And we have known that, but we haven't experienced that because we've been living from the vanity of the carnal mind. We've thought for years that we had to earn God's favor by our obedience. We have lived under a performance-based Christianity. And we've brought over from the Old Testament the concept that if you're not good, God is angry. Oh, we need to stop living under some kind of an outward law. When we break the law, or we make a mistake, or we fall into a habit, we need not feel guilty and condemned. We just need to realize that God still has a work to do within us. And we need to look away to the cross and begin to appreciate forgiveness. Father, I'm so thankful that you're not holding me accountable. And that as I continue to feed upon the Lamb. One day, when I was pretty discouraged over my habits and my shortcomings, the Lord revealed to me a portion of Psalms 23. And he said, I have prepared a table for you in the very presence of your enemies. Well, up until that time, I thought my enemies were out there somewhere. Perhaps my wife that would give me a bad time, or perhaps my co-workers that would give me a bad time, or perhaps it was a devil that gave me a bad time, or perhaps it was evil spirits in the airwaves that those were my enemies. But what I discovered is God said, no, your enemies are within you. Your enemies has nothing to do with anything outside of you. Your true enemies are what is within you. Your anger, your bitterness, your hatred, your gossip, your divisions. Those of you who call yourselves Pentecostals and don't like the Baptists, and those who call yourselves Baptists and you don't like the Pentecostals, that's your enemy. Your enemy is that carnal man that sits as God in this temple and rules you rather than the Spirit of God rising up and ruling you. So we're beginning to realize the magnitude of Calvary's victory. So God said, I prepared a presence before you. I prepared a table before you in the presence of your enemies. Before I seen that, I shared a lot last night about my history, but before I saw that in Psalm 23, one of my huge problems was anger. I came from a family of angry people. To give you an example, My dad would do things like, he was playing a guitar one day. He played and sang, and the string broke. Rather